Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Southwest Affiliate Stroke Bootcamp series. We are excited to offer this 15-week course as a way to educate stroke coordinators in key components of their role, provide tools and resources to build and maintain successful programs, and to assist in building a large network of peers. Before we get started, we would like to go over just a few housekeeping items. To avoid any background noise, all lines have been placed on mute. For questions, you can unmute your line by pressing *6 or type in the Q&A section of WebEx. Please note you will, Please note you will be able to claim your CME CE credit at the end of the 15-week series on September 27th. A copy of today's slides and any handouts will be sent to you within a week of today's call. For future webinar offerings, including the Stroke Bootcamp webinars, please visit www.heart.org/SWA quality. Now we will begin today's webinar. Laura Griffin, Doctor of Nursing Practice, currently serves as VP of Neurological Services for the HCA Gulf Coast Division, where she leads 18 hospitals' neuroscience programs by providing clinically and operational leadership. During her 19 years of clinical practice as a nurse and acute care nurse practitioner, she has focused on critically ill and neurologically impaired patients. Dedicated to higher learning, she shares her knowledge through local and national lectures and has published in journals and texts. I will now hand it over to Laura.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get ready to dive in. And I developed this talk actually in Houston we did something similar. And I was asked to come up with a talk that would help stroke coordinators take their program to the next level. And I knew the single most important way that I could do that was to share some insight on how to leverage strategic relationships. Because there's not a magic bullet to having a great stroke program. And there's no 10 steps to a perfect program. It's a lot of hard work. And a great stroke program is a team sport. And there's a lot of people that you really have to rely on to be successful. So today's talk, we're going to explore the psychology and the sociology of the factors that influence decision-making, because your success directly corresponds to your ability to speak the same language, share your vision, and influence stakeholders towards a common goal. I have no disclosures. You often rely on your stakeholders to make decisions, even if it's just to follow your direction. Many factors go into decision-making. People often believe they make decisions based on logic, but we know that's truly not the case. Because I'm sure that you've had an experience of giving clear-cut evidence of why your stakeholders should be doing something, but they still don't follow your direction. It's because decision-making is complex, and it's impacted by a person's experiences, their views of the world, incentives and disincentives, as well as many other factors, and we're going to cover some of those today. Before you can really know others, you have to know yourself. And if I were to ask two questions, which I often do, I would ask, are you an intuitive person, or do you think you use your senses more often? And do you think you make decisions based purely on logic or a lot more on emotion? And I can bet that most people, when I give this talk, they would say that they're intuitive and that they make decisions based on logic. Not sure what your answers were for yourself. But what if I told you that statistically only 25% of the population is intuitive? And for females, since most of the audience is likely composed of women, 75% of women use emotions as their main factor for making a decision. The truth is, we know our intentions, but we do not know how other people see us or how we come across. And that's because, let's face it, we're not looking in a mirror when we're talking to other people. So before you can influence others, you have to know yourself. And there's a lot of tools out there to help you get a more complete picture. I put a few of them on the screen for you, and I've done most of them. And the one that was most impactful for me was the 360 evaluation. So if you ever get the opportunity to do that, for those of you who don't really know what it is where a facilitator goes to your stakeholders and your peers, and they ask them everything good and bad about you, and then that gets presented back anonymously, and you make a plan on how to make adjustments for that. And you would be surprised at some of the things that people see in you that you don't even see in yourself. Maybe good, maybe bad sometimes. Very valuable tool. And getting to know yourself and other people, it's really important to understand some of the factors that influences others' decisions and behaviors. And life experiences is one that plays a really big role. The quote at the bottom of the slide reminds us that until we experience something, we're not really going to understand it, because it is virtually impossible to see something that doesn't exist in your operating paradigm, because experiences are personal and they're finite. And absolute reality, it really doesn't exist, but your reality exists to you and your stakeholders' reality exists to them, and it may not be the same. Let's take an example. Likely many of you on the phone are parents. Before you were parents, did you really know what it was like to be a parent? Maybe you had an idea of it, and then you became a parent, and you were like, I had no idea. Or how many of you have friends who are not parents, but they believe that they can tell you exactly how to raise your children? You probably roll your eyes and think you don't have any idea. Or maybe you are a parent of a 3-year-old, and your friend is a parent of a teenager. And if we're honest, you wouldn't be able to give experience. You wouldn't be able to give guidance to them because you haven't experienced what it's like to be a parent of a 14-year-old. And while experiences are important, it's my personal opinion that in order to fully appreciate a perspective, you don't just need to have one experience. You also need to have the opposite experience as well, if you really want to appreciate the magnitude of it. Think of a firefly. Do you see it during the day? You don't, because in order to appreciate the light, you have to be in the dark. Dichotomies make an experience much richer. Because of your role, you guys have seen what a stroke looks like. But remember, not everyone has had that vantage point. I would urge you to take your CEO, CFO, whoever your executive leader is, and take them to visit a patient, but not one patient, 2 patients. Pick a day where you have one that received alteplase or that had a mechanical thrombectomy, and they went back to baseline. And let them tell their story, and then take them right next door to the one that didn't get in time, so that they can really understand why door-to-needle times are important, or community education is so important. Because until they see both sides, they really won't understand what it is and how important what you do is every day. And when you can't provide an opportunity to experience stroke care, stories can be very powerful. So I usually start almost all my talks with the exact same things. If you've ever heard me talk, you definitely would know that I do this. And I start with a would you rather game. I don't know how many of you have ever played that game with your children, but for those of you who haven't, essentially you pick a card and you don't win or lose. There's usually 2 horrible things on the card, and it's would you rather, but it might be something like would you rather wear a bikini in the Arctic or wear a sweatsuit in the desert. So they're both meant to be not pleasant things, and that you have to choose between them, and the point is just to have discussion with your kids. So I use that concept, and I say, the audience, would you rather have a heart attack, be on oxygen the rest of your life, not be able to go to the bathroom without being breathless, have to ride in a wheelchair to go to the grocery store, or would you rather have a stroke, never be able to feed yourself again, take yourself to the bathroom, or tell those people that mean the world to you that you love them? And no one ever chooses the stroke. And that can be very powerful to get them in the mindset, for them to visualize what that would be like if we took that away from them. And it's really important because those are the only 2 things in healthcare right now we can reverse them like they never happened. So I usually start with that, and then I go on to a personal story. So this is my dad. My dad was a paramedic and a respiratory therapist in healthcare my whole life. And the day I started my job at HC, I got a call from my brother that my dad had a stroke. And luckily for him, it was a posterior stroke, so he could still talk and walk and take himself to the bathroom. He had some visual field cuts. He couldn't see very well, mildly a little tiny bit confused. But I was able to get him on the telephone. And I said, Dad, why did you not go to the hospital? Because he didn't go for a day and a half. Why didn't you go to the hospital so you could have gotten the alteplase? And he said, well, my vision changed all of a sudden, and I felt a little confused, and I thought I had a cataract. And I said, Dad, cataracts don't come on that quickly, you know that. They said, well, my neighbor had a cataract. And they took a deep breath and they said, and maybe I didn't want to admit that that's what was happening to me. And that happens a lot to our patients, that they want to take a nap and pretend like it's not happening. And that, again, supports all the reason that we need you all out doing community education, because that's an important part of your role. But sometimes it may be, oh, that your administrators might not see that as valuable. But when you can tell a story, sometimes that's what it takes in order for them to understand. And we discussed personal experiences as a factor that influences us and others. What I refer to as lenses also impacts us. All of us have been to the eye doctor and they'll say, is 1 better than 2, 3 better than 4? And every time they flip that lens, everything looks different, but the eye chart didn't change. Another example, consider someone with color blindness. Just because they cannot see red or green doesn't mean the colors don't exist for the rest of us. And lenses are forged from a sociological perspective through the influence of large groups of people. And there's common lenses that really affect all of us. Culture, where you grew up, societal, what's acceptable in society, generational, what generation did you come from, and religious preferences are some pretty common ones. And having a different viewpoint doesn't make one person right or the other person wrong. Another viewpoint might be just exactly what you need to solve the problem. And it's important to remember that no matter how hard we try and how much time we spend on it, we often can't see everything because we can't do that alone. And sometimes we need to find someone with a different perspective to challenge our program. Sometimes we need a microscope to kind of flesh out all those minor details. And sometimes we need a telescope to give us the big picture. Think for a minute about your vantage point. Are you looking through a microscope or are you looking through a telescope? And the person you need to negotiate with, which one are they? Filters. Filters, they don't change the clarity of the perspective. It's like looking through sunglasses. The picture still remains the same on the other side. They're biases. I mean, have you ever known someone who's always pessimistic, they're dark and gloomy, everything's going wrong, and they have this why we can't and not how we can perspective? Or how about the one on the flip side? They're wearing rose-colored glasses, and no matter what problem you brought to them, my nurses are great, I don't need to fix anything, I don't know what you're talking about, we're good. You need to understand your audience biases and be watching for them. So you can do one of two things. You can either educate them out of it, or you can work around them. The many factors we discussed were created over an entire lifetime, but even those factors are not as powerful as incentives and disincentives. They're personal to the individual, and human beings react viscerally to these. Our brains are literally wired to produce neurotransmitters for pleasure and rewards. But even more powerful than rewards are the fear of loss. Many studies have been done that show that people can stand to pass up a reward, but they will react passionately about a takeaway. Keep this in mind when you're presenting an option that can be seen as a takeaway. I'd like to explore this concept a little bit further by focusing for a minute on pay. I often hear nurses say things like the administrators, all they think about is getting their bonuses. I'd like to paint a little clearer picture so that you can see the perspective of a person who receives a bonus as a part of their pay structure. Because when I poll a lot of nurses, they see bonus as an incentive, but it's not. It's a disincentive. And if I show you this example, I think you'll understand why. So I understand the amount of pay in here that the C-suite probably doesn't make the same amount as a nurse, but I wanted to be able to show you this side by side so that you get an illustration of it. So if we take on the left-hand side, we take a nurse who makes $32.50 an hour, working 40 hours a week, but maybe she wants a vacation home or she wants to put her kids through college or for whatever reason, she says, you know what, I'd like to work 60 hours a week, make some extra money, and she's going to work the extra 20 hours a week, and she's going to make time and a half. And so she can pick up an extra $50,000 a year. And so her total, we'll call it total package, is $117,000. If you go to the C-suite, I can promise you that there is not a single person in the C-suite that doesn't work at least 60 hours, even if you don't see them. They're out at the Rotary Club, and they're out having physician dinners till 10 o'clock at night, and they're on the board of the school. They're constantly in the community. And so they work a lot of hours, and usually it's at least 60 hours. And so when somebody in the C-suite goes in order to negotiate their pay, they go in and they negotiate a pay package. And that's why I used the word earlier. So let's say I was a CNO and I wanted to go in and they'd say, well, we'd love you to come and work for us. Your package is $117,000. And your base salary is $82,000, but you'd get whatever percentage is bonus, and that's an additional $35,000. Now, when you think your whole package is $117,000, and for some reason you're not going to get that $35,000, it looks like a takeaway because you were presented that that was really your opportunity for what you were going to make. And a couple things to consider. One, as I said, I understand that the pay is probably higher than that, but there's a lot of work-life balance and risks that go on that, which we're going to talk about when we get into individual stakeholders. But think for yourself for a minute. If I were to say, you were a bedside nurse rather than a stroke coordinator, but if I were to say to you, you know, Nurse Susie, we're willing to pay you $117,000. You're gonna have to work as hard as you can, and part of that was going to be your base salary. We're going to give you $67,000, and that other $50,000. As long as all your other teammates who you don't have direct influence over do a really good job in the unit and their quality scores are good and their hand washing is good and everybody else is good, we'll give you the extra $50,000. Most of us would be like, you must be kidding me. I want to know what money I'm going to get on the front side. I don't want it to be a crapshoot on the back side. And that's really what the C-suite is thinking when you might come to them and you're going to do something that's going to impact what they're going to be able to take home to their family. And so you have to just know that so you know how to approach the problem. Now, risk and benefit, or risk and reward, however you want to look at it, it's also a consideration because leaders are responsible for more than just themselves. They must consider the risk versus benefit to the whole organization. And not just the patients and not just the organization, but the community and everyone that works in that hospital. And it's a huge responsibility filled with a lot of risk. So when you ask them to do something that seems a little risky in one way or another, they may seem a little hesitant to cooperate. This particular slide, I actually sold it. It was presented by a COO at a conference I was at about stroke. And I loved it because I thought it so perfectly illustrated the weight of importance for those who work in healthcare. For instance, the CFO on the top, they're going to look at finances much more than the staff nurse. And honestly, they're going to look at almost only finances with a little bit of concern for quality. And the staff nurse at the bottom is going to focus more on the quality than what it takes to keep the doors open. And that's what we want. Because in the end, the patient gets everything that they need. And we have quality care and still are able to keep our doors open and pay all the bills. And so we all have a different role on the team. So we're going to talk about each one of these stakeholders a little bit more detail so we can really understand what their role is, how everyone else sees them, and what they're incentivized by. CEO, what's their role? Their role is to be in charge of everything. They are responsible for everything that happens in the hospital. Now, they're incentivized much more heavily on the revenue and volume side, so money and people in the hospital, and that the hospital stays full. When you talk to them, in their mind, no matter how compassionate they are, they're going to see stroke as a DRG and as contribution margin, which is basically a finance term. How much money are we going to make? They're seen as political, like all they care about is the mighty dollar. Their risk is the highest because they're responsible for the hospital's success, and their responsibility is also the highest. If the doors don't stay open, then people don't get health care in the community, and staff lose their jobs. That's a huge mental burden. So think about it for a minute. While a staff nurse maybe has 2 patients in an ICU, maybe up to 7 patients on a med-surg floor, CEO is responsible for the entire orchestra. Of the C-suite, there's the second highest risk of losing their job in the hospital because they're responsible for the whole thing. So when you're going to talk to a CEO, you're going to want to think about the things that are important to them so that you know how to present that forward. And again, we'll talk a little more business further on in the talk. Many of you probably report either to quality or the CNO. It's pretty common in a hospital. And probably you're most familiar with CNOs, but their role is usually clinical quality and patient satisfaction in most hospitals. There could be some additional things. What you may be surprised about is what they're incentivized based on. You would guess that they're incentivized based on customer satisfaction, and clinical quality, but they're also incentivized on net revenue. Why? Because they have the highest labor costs, and the nurses use all the supplies in the hospital, and so the cost of supplies are very high. And of course, also on volume, because if the customers aren't happy, the patients aren't happy, they don't come back. And so the CNOs incentivize on a lot more things than what you think about when you go in to talk about things with them. But of course, if you were to go in and talk to them about clinical quality, if that's the topic you want to talk about of the C-suite, that is the person you'd want to go and visit with, unless you had a CMO in your hospital. The CNO has the largest risk of losing their job in the entire C-suite for poor performance because of all the things that we just talked about, so a lot of risk. The CFO, let's just face it, revenue, 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 revenue. They care about the money. Honestly, they are the ones who make sure that the CEO and the CNO and everybody else doesn't go crazy and spend too much, or that we're not, creating a backlog of patients. Oftentimes, most people don't know that they usually have a role to manage throughput. And the reason, of course, is we need to get patients out to get patients in. And so they do things like work on ED hold hours, make sure the volumes stay high, and they're often responsible for case management. So one thing I like to ask nurses is, do you know how hospitals make money? Oftentimes they don't, and I'm not sure about the audience on today, but for inpatients, hospitals are paid on a DRG, which means they get a lump sum for that patient. So for stroke patients, that's commonly DRG 61 to 65 if they're medical patients, and then there's some in the 20s if they're surgical or endovascular candidates. And essentially they get a lump sum. So let's just pretend for a moment that for a stroke patient, we only got $100. We got $100 to take care of this patient. Well, the government sets something called an average geometric length of stay, mean length of stay. GMLOS, you may have heard it called. And they say, you know what, you should be able to take care of the patient in 3 days and get them out the door. And so we'll pay you $100 for 3 days, but on day 4, if they're still in your hospital, you have to pick up the cost of those extra days. Like the hospital has to pay for it. So essentially the nurses pay for it, the CEOs pay for it, everyone pays for it that are working at the hospital for any days beyond that. And that's just the truth of the way it works. So a lot of times what we see as nurses is we see, oh, they're just pushing patients. We're just trying to get more patients in because they just care about the money. And that's partially true. But it's also partially true that the government or the payer or the insurance says, I'm only giving you this many days. And if you can't get it done in those days, then you're going to eat the cost. And most people don't know that. So it's important to understand. Organizations are stakeholders. So this could be insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies. It could be organizations like American Heart. And the role really depends on their mission. But we often forget they are businesses too. And they have leaders just like the CEO of a hospital. Because for all these people I just talked about, it's easy to say as a nurse that we also just do the right thing for our patients. But without margin, there's no mission. If you can't keep the doors open, you can't offer the services. So it's important to put our mindset around that and make sure that when we're presenting to certain people that we're presenting all of that and show that we actually care of them. Physicians, we work with them every day. We know what they do. We take care of patients. I don't know how much you've ever sat down and thought about what their incentives are. They're incentivized to move quickly. They care about safety, but it's safety for them, so medical legal liability, and what their reputation is. How do other doctors feel about them? Because they'll give them patients to see if they trust them, and they care about their performance, mostly because of reputation and legal safety. How many times have you gone and you asked the doctor, I need to meet with you, and they can't find the time to talk to you. And you get very frustrated, and you don't really understand, this is important, you have a fallout, or we need to change a policy. And the reason is the way physicians are paid. So they're paid by Medicare Part B. They'll see a patient. They'll come up with something called an evaluation and management code. Let's just say an average level 2 E&M code is about $70 when they see a patient, and they could see 4 patients in an hour. So let's just say they get paid $280 an hour. And think of how much time they will lose if they take the time to speak with you. Let's say you want to talk with them for 30 minutes. And so when they see that 30 minutes, they see $140 that just went down the drain. That's because you've impacted their workflow, and now they can't see those 2 patients that they would have been able to see in that time frame. It's not because of you. It's because of them. And you would do the same. If I were to say to you, I want to have an hour meeting with you, and you're not getting paid during this time, or you got to pay me back the hour I paid you for it, I don't think you'd be very likely to want to get to that meeting because you see it as a takeaway. I don't want to lose my money. I'd like to have my money. So keep that in mind when you're wanting to talk with them. And then we talked a little bit about reputation and safety for them. You have to tell them the why. And they have to trust you as a subject matter expert. Because I'll give you a couple of examples of my own experience. So I'm an acute care nurse practitioner. I used to work 24-hour shifts. And I've been in the ICU before taking care of a patient and getting a call from the floor. And I've had nurses that call and maybe they say, Laura, I need you to run upstairs because I have this patient and they have a run of VTAC. And I think to myself, I don't know that nurse or I don't trust that nurse because I've worked with her before and something has happened. And I start asking a lot of questions. And usually the more questions they ask likely means they don't trust where you're coming from. And so she's like, well, she has VTAC and lead-tude. And I said, then it's not VTAC, it's only in one lead, and now maybe I don't trust her very much. And so the next time she calls, I'm not really going to trust her very much. And that's because that can put the person on the other end of the phone in a legally liable situation. And they want to believe that they can trust you when you're telling them something. So when you're talking to doctors, a couple of key things. Don't waste their time. So be concise when you need to talk to them. Have everything ready. So it's as short of a visit as possible, particularly if they're not being paid as a medical director. And use primary source documents as backup. And what are primary source documents? There's things like the American Heart, American Stroke Association guidelines. There's a Texas Administrative Code if you're in Texas. I mean, I have plenty of states on here who aren't, but you have state laws in every one of the states that you could go in and you could look up what are we supposed to be doing. Use those as your backup so that they know that you go to those sources when you have a question, and then they'll trust you. When you come to them and you don't have them, they'll say, oh, I know she would have already gone and looked up what those guidelines are. Nursing. We're likely all nurses on the phone today, and we know what nurses do. But the role of nurses kind of changed a lot, at least over my 20 years. Because nurses used to have a lot more flexibility in their critical thinking than they're having these days. I mean, they're becoming more and more task-oriented, and not all of them, but it seems to be more often because there's so much more to do. And so their incentives are going to be based on time more than anything, and safety risks, such as exposure to biohazards or to violence, but that's really it. Now, the pure business people, they will see nursing for some of the beautiful things that it is, a caring and kind profession that helps us take care of patients. And there's the ones that will say, oh, they're too idealistic, or they like to throw resources at a problem. And that's in their mind, the bias they already have set up. So you have to be prepared for that when you go to speak with them. But that's partly because nurses don't share in the risk. And so keep in mind that most nurses are paid for every minute they're working. And the only true disincentive that they have to not do the things you need them to do is anything that causes an alteration in their workflow, because it impacts their ability to get all those tasks done during their shift. So think about someone going into an isolation room, and they have to go change a wound. And this is the first day they have the patient. They really don't know what supplies they're going to need. What are they going to do? They're going to stuff their pockets full of Kerlix and tape and whatever else that they need, and probably more than they need, because they don't want to have to come back out and put a gown back on again, because it's going to take time. So they stuff all those supplies in their pocket for their convenience, and they take care of the patient. But they don't think for a minute about what's going to happen to all those supplies when they have to terminally clean the room. Sometimes it's hundreds and thousands of dollars, depending on the type of supplies, that we just throw in the trash. And the nurses aren't thinking about those. And honestly, a little bit we want them to, but we don't want them to think about it a lot because we just want to take great care of patients. But that's what I mean by they don't share in the risk of the hospital. So when you're talking to nurses, focus on workflow. If you're going to ask them to do something, even if it's the right thing, even if it's in a practice guideline, even if it's state law, you're going to ask them to do it, try to make it not impact their workflow as much as possible. Or you're going to have to convince them of why they would impact it was so worth impacting their workflow in order to get it done so that they don't find a workaround. Now, I covered a lot of stakeholders. And I'm hoping that when you get ready to have your next meeting with one of them, that you consider your audience and you can tailor your message accordingly. But what about you? What do you think your job is? What do other people think your job is? Because we've learned perception is everything. And we talked a lot about it today. So ask yourself, what does the government think your job is? In most states, and I know in Texas, a stroke coordinator of some sort must be over a stroke program. So what does the government think your role is? And why did they think you needed to be there? What does the C-suite think your job is? The clinical staff, the doctors, your medical director. Because how you're viewed is based on how you present yourself to everybody else. Are you an abstractor? Is that how people think of you? Because abstractors are thought of as old news. They're past-oriented. They'll come to a meeting and they'll say, in the month of July, we had 20 strokes, ischemic stroke, we had 3 TPAs, 2 fallouts, this, that, and they're just talking about data. And I call that data dump. And they're kind of saying, oh, Texas or New Mexico or Wyoming or wherever says we have to have one, so they're an unavoidable cost. They meet our regulations, but they really don't bring any value. All they do is maintain this program. Is that what you want to be? You have to ask yourself. Because if all you're doing is going into a meeting and talking about your data, then that's how they're going to see you. Or do you want to be a program developer? And a program developer is future-oriented. They're looking ahead. Brings life and creation to the program. They focus some on the business growth. How do we make sure that we can take care of even more stroke patients in the community? Do we do it better than our competitors? Can we do it better than our competitors? And if we do, then our patients in our community deserve to come to our hospital. When you're seen like this, the C-suite sees you as paying for yourself over and over again because you're invested and you're responsible. And so if you have data that doesn't look very good, you're saying, yeah, that might be in the lab department, and I'm not responsible for the lab. But in that meeting, when you say that you've missed your lab 6 of the 10 times, I had a meeting with the director, and this is our plan to correct that because you're taking responsibility. You're not the owner, but you're taking responsibility of working to make it better. And let's face it, you don't have the authority most of the time to force people to do anything. You're likely not anyone's boss. And this job can be thankless. It's because the bedside nurse and the physician, they're seen in the thick of it, and they get thanked by a lot of families. And what you do is important, but it's hidden. So if you want to move from a clinician to, honestly, a titleless leader, you want to move the needle, you have to use influence and evidence, and you have to avoid data dumps so that you can influence those strategic relationships. And you need to arm yourself with business data. I like to say, become multilingual. And I don't mean learn Spanish or learn French. I mean learn how to speak the same language as the people who do the business in your hospital. So while we don't have time to go into all that today, I would urge you to spend a little bit of time with somebody in the data department or the CFO or case management. And if you don't know coding very well, or you don't know what your market share is in your neighborhood, or what volume you had this month versus last month, you should learn those things. Because think about how powerful it would be to a CEO or a CFO or someone who's focused a little more on the financial side of the business to say, Mr. CEO, in the last quarter, I found 20 charts that were miscoded for stroke, and I don't know if you know, but to go from a stroke that gets no TPA to a stroke, or out of place, to go to a stroke that does, it's a list of about $16,000, and part of that's because the drug is expensive. But you make more money when you take care of patients the right way, and isn't that the best thing when you make more money and you do the right thing for patients? That's exactly what we want to be able to do. But imagine how valuable you become when you say, I caught 20 of these that were miscoded, and this correlates to $60,000 or whatever it is. They see you as very valuable to the company. Or what if you say, you know, Mr. CFO, or my director, or my business development director, or my VP of neurosciences, you know, our volume went up an extra 40 patients. And I really think that has to do with all this EMS outreach I did, or the community education that I did. And you tie all the work you did back to the things that matter to them. That's powerful. That's very powerful. And they see you then as an ally, not just something they have to have. If I could give you any advice, don't do your job alone. Never, ever do your job alone, because it's hard. And it's even harder when you have to do it by yourself. I like to ask people in some of my lectures, and I say to them, how many people in the room have amazing door-to-needle numbers during business hours, but their nights and weekends aren't so good? And you would be surprised that usually more than half of the room raises their hands. And the reason is because the stroke coordinator is doing it by themselves then. Deputize people, convince them, influence them that your cause is so important so that they're your eyes and ears when you're not even there. And review things timely and in the same way every single time so that they know what you expect of them, what you need from them, and that they keep doing it the same way over and over and over again until it becomes hardwired for them. So don't do it by yourself. If you were to run into a burning building by yourself with a bucket of water, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to get burned. We don't want you to get burned out, and we don't want you to leave because your job's so important. So don't do it alone. And you're going to have tough conversations. If you don't want to just be an abstractor, you're going to have tough conversations. So in order to do that, you have to know your audience. And you have to speak in a language the other person understands. And you have to know someone's vantage point to be able to do that. And particularly if the person that you're needing to talk to is in a position of power and that you need something from them. Not that you have to tell them what they want to hear, but you have to tell them in a way that they understand what's in it for them. And that's what WIFM is, what's in it for me. You need to tell them what's in it for them. And lastly, be your own cheerleader. Sell your worth to the right audience. Show them, prove to them that you're invaluable. Focus on strategy, not only on your data. Don't look like an abstractor. Be the subject matter expert. Use primary source documents as your backup. And that really is the majority of our talk today. I like to put these couple of tools at the very end because I've read them myself, and I think they're so valuable. Crucial conversations, I'm not selling anything. These are just things that work for me, and I just want to share them as resources. But that might help you have a difficult conversation, or influencer might show you a different way of how to influence people. And cowork process at work might tell you about what's that stuff people are keeping under the table that they're not just bringing up and sharing with you, all the experiences and lenses and factors. Again, there are a million other great books out here. These are some of my favorites I just wanted to share with you, and I'd be happy to open it up for any questions.
Hi, everyone. In case you are on mute, you can *6 to unmute and ask any questions. Again, *6 to unmute to ask any questions.
I must have answered them all.
I think you did, Laura. You did such a great job. Well, thank you so much again, Laura, for this great presentation. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who participated in this series. As a reminder, this copy of the slides will be sent to you. Yes?
Hi, sorry, it took me a second to get off mute. I just have one quick question for Laura.
Oh, sure.
Yes. Hey, Laura, it's Allison. I have a question if you could maybe share with the group. You mentioned in your presentation about lists of DRG codes and the values that are associated with them. Is there a place that's easily available or, somewhere that we can find things like that? I mean, how is it that stroke coordinators can get their hands on a list of the DRG codes and what the values are?
I think that's a great question because most people don't know where to go to find that. And so I have a couple of answers. One, the best place to go is to go and have a meeting with someone in your financial department because here's the thing. The other resource I'm going to tell you is going to be a basic kind of reimbursement for Medicare, but what your hospital really gets for that in the long run is going to be better at your hospital or if you have a division like we have here to go and talk to somebody. So like at HCA, we're very data rich, luckily for us. And I can pull out of our databases that for the entire division. And I can tell them in the market of Houston, this is about what it pays. But not everyone has that resource, and I understand that. So there's actually, and it's not very easy for me to tell everyone how to get there, but maybe I could send a link and you all could send it out. But there are some files on the Medicare website, a little hidden deeply, and they will give you an idea by DRG what the Medicare reimbursement is. Now that, of course, doesn't take into account the cost to keep the building open, or maybe the cost of the drug or any of the things that would normally come out of that, but it would give you a baseline so that you could at least get an idea. And the way that they do it, it's a little difficult to understand without help, but is that they'll give it a weight. So it might say 1.25 or 3.27 or whatever it happens to be. And you have to search through the CMS website to see for the year how many dollars are associated with the weight, and so you times the dollars per that. Every year, I basically go to that, and I pull it up, and then I look up what the dollar amount for the weight is, and I make myself a table every single year because it changes every year. They might tweak it a little bit. And so those are a couple of ways to find out, but the best way to really understand, because payer mixes change, let's face it, some places have a lot more self-pay. Luckily with stroke for hospitals, a lot of it's going to be Medicare, right, because they're oftentimes over 65, but definitely not always. And so you'd get a better idea of that. But really, if you go to your financial people and say, I would love to know what the DRG reimbursement is for these 6 codes, they could probably give it to you.
One other question, sorry, you also mentioned I'm trying to think now. There's one other thing you mentioned besides DRG codes that was something that I thought might be hard to get access to, and now I can't think what it was.
For the doctors? Is it about the physician side? But the physician side, the physicians aren't paid for DRGs. They're paid by every day. They can go in. They have an endless amount of time. As long as that patient needs hospital care, they get paid every day. So they're usually not incentivized to get people out of the hospital. That's also a difficulty. Maybe the doctor's like, no, keep them another day. And the hospital's like, absolutely, don't you dare. And the reason is the doctor's still getting paid, but the hospital quit getting paid a day ago. And so that's important to know. E&M codes, you can just Google physician E&M codes, and it will tell you there's E&M codes and critical care codes, and that's all there is, and it's actually really easy. So there's like 6 or 7 codes, and it will tell you how much they make. Like I know that a level 2 E&M code is around $78 or $80. So you'd know how much of dollars of time you're taking from your physician every time you ask them to come to a meeting.
I remembered what it was I was looking for. You mentioned length of stay.
Length of stay. It's on that same Medicare where I was telling you that I'll have to search the link for you guys and you can send it out. So on that same table, it'll list the DRG. It'll list that weight I was telling you about. So you have to do one calculation to get the actual amount because you have to times it times the annual amount for the weight. And then it will tell you the geometric length of stay. It will tell you right there for all of them. Like for instance, most people probably don't know, and don't quote me exactly, but for stroke, it's about like it's less than 3.5. It's like 3.25, 3.5 is the length of stay for a stroke, and that even includes a hemorrhagic stroke that doesn't get surgery. Sometimes I think to myself, my gosh, they're going to need so much to stay in the hospital so much longer. And they say, no, they should go to another level of care. So being educated about that and looking for ways to help get patients to the right level of care and understanding how long that the hospital really gets reimbursed for is really important.
Have you seen in your experience with your coordinators, because I know you oversee a bunch of different hospitals, do you encourage your coordinators to keep track of that, or to like kind of know what their average length of stay is for the quarter or for the month or anything like that, or do you handle most of that?
I don't make them do it. A while back, I'd asked them, and it's been probably more than a year, and we have had some switches over. I suggested that if they want to, I'll help them. But sometimes people feel a little overwhelmed. So I would say that in this talk, I sped the way to be a all-star stroke coordinator. But maybe if you're a new stroke coordinator, you're like, that's too much for me. I just want to know certification guidelines right now. Or I just want to know how to put a meeting together. I mean, that's why you're having this wonderful series, because you can pick and choose. But once you've kind of mastered it, in order to go from good to great, you need to know all those things. So I don't make people know that. I help them if they want to do it.
I think that's really good advice. I wish that, I think that was something that I didn't really understand when I was still a coordinator, and it's definitely really good advice for some of our more seasoned coordinators out there, that if you're looking for a way to sort of advance your position in your hospital or to show that you're worth more, you know, those are maybe the types of things you want to start presenting to your stroke team and to your stakeholders, to let them know, hey, I'm watching this too, and this is important to our program.
I think one of the things that stroke coordinators, because there is a high turnover, and I think we don't always support them the way that they need, but one of the things that is maybe a misnomer is, I got to stroke coordinator, so my only chance for career advancement beyond that is to go into quality or to become like a stroke unit director. And those are pathways. But there's one outside of that, and that is if you went to your meetings and you said all these things that were business terms, there are jobs at HCA in which that there's a service line director in a hospital, and they could say, you seem to know the business side of this, and we know you're a nurse and you're not in business. I don't have a business degree. We think you can do that. And so you could even grow outside of just even the nursing if you really started to get some of this stuff down.
Hey, Laura, it's Deanna. So we did have a couple of questions come in. So one of the questions was, what was the CMS website that Laura gave for the DRG? So
yeah, I'm going to have to find it for you all, because unfortunately I don't have it off the top of my head. But I'll send it to both you and Allison, and you can forward it out to the list of people on the call.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then the other question was, what's the best way to learn the business side of the hospital besides getting with the CFO or the CEO?
It's going to depend on the hospital. We may have some rural partners on here. We may have some huge ones. If you have a physician sales person, they're a little less intimidating. You could go and spend time with them. You could ask even a nursing director, hey, I really want to learn a little bit more. Now, they're going to focus more on nursing, but you could ask them, could you teach me a little bit about the business of the hospital and how it works? You can go online. Like, let me write that down too as something to send. I'll have to find it, but there are some great websites. If you were just to Google healthcare finances, you can find, and I probably even have one, where it says things that a clinician needs to know about how a hospital runs. And it will talk to you about things like contribution margin and market share, and what do those terms mean when people are talking about them, so that when you're sitting in the room, 'cause it's not nice to sit in the room and have people talk about something you don't understand. It makes you feel like you're not intelligent, even though your skills are a different skill set than they are. But when you start hearing them, then you start paying attention to them. And then you start learning them, and then you start using them as a part of your language, and then they feel like they belong to the same group as that you're in. And so Google hospital financing, or learning hospital finances, or hospital finances for doctors or nurses. And you can find a lot on the internet, but I am almost positive that I've already saved something from the internet on that, and I'll be happy to add that with the other one.
That's great. Thank you, Laura. Again, thank you so much for the great presentation. And for those that participated, just a reminder, the copy of today's slides and any handouts that Laura will send us, we will send to you within a week of today's call. And also, just a reminder that you can claim your CME CE credits at the end of the 15-week series on September 27th. Again, everyone, thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.